Hi, everyone. My name is Jake Kunzler, for anybody who doesn't know me, and I'm excited for my presentation today to talk a little bit about the homelessness problem in the United States. It's something that's important to me, and when I saw the opportunity to pick anything we like for the argumentative topic, it was what I went right to, just because I've had family members that have experienced homelessness and close friends that have been very close to that environment. And although, especially in Cache Valley, it's maybe something that we're not exposed to as much, it's definitely something that's certainly serious. In fact, a report in the United States showed that about 600,000 people experienced homelessness in the year 2020. It's a number that's kind of hard to calculate, with some people's experience with homelessness being chronic, lasting throughout years and decades of their lives, and some people's experience with homelessness being something that's usually pretty temporary. But either way, a recent report has found that the adverse effects of homelessness affect people in a myriad of different ways. Those can be physical, specifically with access to temperatures that can be really harmful, whether that's heat or cold, depending on where you're at in the United States. Even with a lot of great food options available through charitable organizations, malnourishment is still rampant among the homeless, and with severe lack of access to proper medicines, medical coverage is really difficult. And so there's a lot of illnesses that spread through the homeless, especially with this last year of the pandemic. A lot of us were kind of stuck inside our houses and complaining about that, but I imagine we could take a sobering moment to reflect on what that experience would have been like if we hadn't had the house in the first place, and if we hadn't had the bare capacity to social distance in the way that we'd been asked to. Not only that, but this same report kind of elucidates on the difficulty it is for homeless individuals to progress spiritually and emotionally and intellectually, the same way that lots of us do in life, in ways that are required to engage socially. And that might not seem like the biggest thing in the world, but when it comes to getting a job and passing an interview and working well with people around us, those basic social skills that we sometimes take for granted, the experiences that develop, those just aren't available to people that are experiencing homelessness. And so that basic kind of barrier to entry for a lot of those positions is made kind of impossible. Instead, being forced to live, we can kind of see in camps similar to this, where just basic tents and basic shelter are provided in kind of communities that become a microcosm of the overall environment that homeless people are subject to. A lot of that issue can be because of the way that land functions in the United States. We have two charts here, as you can see. The first one is important because the land in red reflects land that is federally owned. And federal owned land is going to be very difficult for homeless individuals to exist on, given the nature of exclusion from keeping people there, from developing it, from working there, to the creation of basic public necessities like bathrooms and access to food in places like that. It's just not going to be a hospitable environment. And then the other part of the land shows just the top 100 landowners in the United States and the land that they have access to. Because, like we said, 95% of available land in the United States privately is owned by 3% of the private population. We live in a place where power and available and access to power is strongly associated with the land that we own. And so those with the most power tend to accrue the most land, leaving not as much available for people with less access to those familial relationships or business relationships, instead being forced to rent in different places, which is where kind of that access to money and that access to that basic social skills is needed to get out of homelessness in the first place. Um, that is further exacerbated by the effects of a couple of laws. We have something called the Fair Housing Act in the United States, and this is a graphic that was put out by the federal government to kind of show the different places that are protected. If you can't see from the camera, it lists disability, race, sex, color, national origin, religion, and family status. And that was kind of seen as an all-encompassing group of protections, but one group that's markedly absent from this are members of the LGBTQ plus community. Homelessness is kind of rampant among the gay community and among individuals with separate gender orientations, especially among youth who don't feel comfortable in homes, who then find as soon as they go out on their own that it's legal for landlords to refuse and deny them housing on basis of their gender or sexual orientation. Evictions can be legal. Some states are starting to develop their own protections, but there's no federally recognized protection for housing rights of members of the LGBTQ plus community. And that can definitely exacerbate housing conditions in communities like that and others that lack that kind of legal protection. Then that's kind of made even further worse by the general perception and the stigma that homeless people receive. I'm sure we've all seen signs kind of like this saying that don't give in to panhandling, 93% of the money you give goes to drugs and alcohol, or that handouts don't help, kind of furthering this idea that if you're to give homeless people that are panhandling money, that you're just fueling alcoholism and drug addictions and nothing that can help them. What's interesting is that a lot of these signs, especially the one above here that specifically says that 93% of the money you give goes to drugs and alcohol, will use specific numbers like that without citing specific relevance in order to give kind of this false sense of scientific truth to the stigmas they're trying to provide. When in reality, the basic assumption there is that homeless people can't be trusted the materials that they need. That if they had the money, that they would just spend it on drugs and alcohol, that if they had the homes, they would just destroy them. It's this self-propagating idea that once an individual becomes homeless, the resources they need to no longer be homeless are denied them because they're not seen deserving of it and believe they'd destroy it. Socially, we like to blame these individuals for their conditions rather than asking kind of what we as a society can do to help. Which is what I've got on the last screen here, which is this kind of like, what can we as individuals do in response to homelessness? And the biggest thing that I've found in my research is just recognition of the people in those situations. That they feel invisible, that they feel unseen and uncared about, and they're not given that basic human dignity by society. So even just kind of the same basic social interactions we would give family and friends, just caring about their day, caring about who they are. And if we're in a place where it's possible to us, and if they're panhandling and in a place where they're asking for support, then supporting them in ways that we can, trusting them to spend money on the things that they need. And if worse comes in doubt, we can provide food, we can provide direct access to different basic things like that. And in doing so, we can help to spread some humanity to a group of people who've been denied that. So thank you for taking the time to listen to this presentation that I put together. I think that homelessness is a really unique issue in the way that it's a huge social problem that is affected really heavily by social trends and laws that are outside of our control. But then it's also very much an individual problem that individual people are living, and we have an absolute ability to affect the lives of the homeless people that we see. So thank you so much for listening.